Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a story up now about the first game for Jayden Daniels and the anticipation for what he can do from among the players in the team. Listen, Tress Wade told me that typically after he comes off the field, he's going to go sit down, kind of you rest his back, rest his legs, just to stay, so he doesn't get tight standing there. In this case, he said he's going to want to watch maybe the entire first half to see what Jayden Daniels does, maybe the entire game, because that's the anticipation that he has for what Daniels can do. So that permeates through the team. Anyways, go check it out on ESPN.com. Also, I will be back after the game on Sunday night with a wrap-up of the game, just some observations, of course, things I've done for years. So join that. That should be out. The game's at 4:25 Eastern time. So look for that later in the evening because I'm going to have some other things to write before we get to that point. So it is Friday. Oh, excuse me. I'm taping this on Friday. This is going to be a kind of a new thing that I've done compared to over the years, but it's going to be a lot of like what you need to know, things that you need to know to get yourself ready for the season, for the team, for this game, whatever. Information that I pick up during the week that I want to pass along to you that I think that you will find useful and helpful as you learn about the team and watch the game. So let's get into all that. But before I do, a couple things to talk about. Listen, honest to God, I was taping this and then I get an email from the team about some roster moves and they have just released Byron Pringle. Didn't see that coming because I thought he'd be their kick returner, but after signing Noah Brown, who's a special teams guy, they do have other options that they can use as kick returners. And, I'm not sure at this point what the plans are for him. By the time I'm done with this, I'll probably know more about what the plan is, if they're going to bring him back and put him on a practice squad, whatever, because I thought he was going to help as a kick returner. Anyway, so that kind of muddies the picture a little bit for that. Jamison Crowder will be the punt returner. You do have other guys who can help, whether it's, Mike Samerstill, Austin Eckler, guys have been working there also this summer who I think can fill those roles. So anyway, that was a little bit of move today. And then the other thing is for Sunday's game, defensive tackle Johnny Newton is listed as doubtful. He's got the, pec injury and then, the foot and soft tissue injury that he's been coming back from. He did work in practice on Friday. Clearly, listen, man, again, he's listed as doubtful, but it's been hard to see because he just hasn't practiced that much, whether in the spring or the summer, to then put him out in the first game. So anyway, that's what you need to know there. And then Marcus Mariota has been ruled out. He's got a pec, shoulder, chest issue going on. I don't think it's serious, but he didn't practice this week. So anyways, that's what we know there. But again, with Pringle, I could see him coming back on the practice squad. So right now, I don't know the corresponding move. But again, you can follow ESPN.com, go to Twitter and see what goes on there. So anyway, let's get into things that I think you need to know. And I'm going to start off, before I get into 5 things about that, I do want to talk a little bit more about some things that Dan Quinn talked about today and how he names game captains. So it's going to be individual games or individual captains for each week. So this week, it's Jeremy Reeves, Terry McLaurin, and then Clelin Ferrell. So it's funny because I know that Jeremy Reeves is the big-time leader for them and as a special teams. They really like his story, not just his story, but just the impact he has in that area. And he is a really good leader. And then you have Terry McLaurin. Well, we know what he's represented here. Clelin Ferrell is the one that maybe might surprise people, but he is I think if you had to say a true pro, that's Ferrell. So that's why they pick guys like that. There are other obvious leaders out there. Bobby Wagner would be one. There's multiple guys that I think could classify in that way. And Zach Ertz would do that in his own way. I think Eckler in his own way are those kind of guys. So I think there are more guys that fit that role than in the past, but this is something Quinn likes to do until they get to the postseason. Then he would just name captains and then not rotate each week. But that's a long way to go, folks. But I do think it's interesting how they do it. I think it gives some incentive for people to maybe work a certain way, or maybe you're picking a leader that is not the obvious guy, but the way they work over here says that this guy should be rewarded and go out for the coin toss. So anyway, that's one thing there. The other thing Dan Quinn talked about on Friday, which I found interesting, is how much work he puts in with the scout team. And he's the one out there making sure things are going right with that. Like when he was in Dallas as defensive coordinator, he said he couldn't really do that because when you're you're focused on your side of the ball. As a head coach, he does that. He said, you better believe they're going to get it right if the head coach is looking over their shoulder to do this. But I also think it speaks to the details of things. And I think if you're a practice squad guy and that head coach is watching you and in charge of that, I would think that there's going to be a little bit more incentive for you to do things a certain way in practice and not take it and feel like what you're doing is being noticed. And, I think that's something to me that would stick out a little bit, but it's also, again, it gives by the head coach kind of peering over that and being very involved in that, you get a better look for both sides of the ball. But I do, like I said, the trickle down to me would be if you're a player on that area, then you're going to watch. Now, listen, I remember going back to Steve Spurrier days where at times he would be sitting there. One time I remember watching the first team defense was going against the scout team offense, and Spurrier was on the side showing the specialist how he could bounce the ball on the ground and catch it behind his back. Honestly, God. So when you have, which coach would you rather play for in the NFL? So kind of an easy answer there. Anyways, just wanted to share that. And so now we got some nuts and bolts for this stuff. So let's get to the game. Things that you need to know this week. So let's start with Tampa Bay's blitz, because that's been a big topic of conversation. What's it going to look like? Now, keep in mind the Bucs blitz, the third most of any team last year. That's the way our metrics measured. It's by 5 or more rushers. So however you want to term a blitz or whatever, it's 5 or more rushers in the measuring stick, but it applies to every team. Third most of any team in the NFL. So Todd Bowles likes to do a lot of things. There's some, you get the Wink Martindale types, I think a little bit more chaotic. I think Bowles is more organized chaos, right? He's going to test your rules as an offense. He's going to really get the line. I watched a couple games last year against Jacksonville, against Houston, just to see, you can only do so much, but just watching to see how effective they were with these blitzes, where they were effective with it, what they're doing behind it. I think what they do behind it is going to be dependent on the receivers they're facing. I was talking to one guy here, and they think that they may get more press just because it's a way to disrupt the timing a little bit more, and that could impact a rookie quarterback making his first start. So anyway, we'll see what happens there. I will say there's some guys here who probably welcome getting the press coverage, and I would say this, I think Jaden Daniels would too, because what he's going to do is just step back. He's going to just throw it up and trust his guys. So that's one thing to watch. But one of the things that, again, they test your rules. And so Jacksonville and Houston, to me, handled it differently in terms of success. Jacksonville's offense laid a big egg. They were getting drilled in that game. So a lot of blitzes are going to work because there's really not so much, a lot you can do other than drop back and throw in some of those situations. But I also think they didn't do it like, I thought that the Bucs hurt them they like to do a lot of linebacker and defensive tackle stunts in the middle. And as someone else said, they like to do some double mugs, right? So get 2 linebackers up, one drop, looks like he's dropping, and then he comes. And so you get some of that as well. So they really like to push the envelope over the center. The other thing they were good at doing is creating overloads, getting your line to slide a certain way. And there were times where you'd see 3 linemen blocking one guy and 2 linemen trying to block 3. And that's not the math doesn't work out for the offensive line, but that's what they do. And then with the Bucs, they did a good job of, sometimes taking away what your answers might be against the blitz. So they would drop the defensive ends and take that away. And I think that was something that was noticeable too. But here's where I think what you can look for, because CJ Stroud had success against them. And why is that? Well, there are a couple of things. I think this is what you can pay attention to on Sunday. Moving the pocket. I felt like the Texans did a much better job of moving the pocket than the Jaguars did. So you would create better situations from you. He would roll out a little bit. He would get some play actions. He would get some bootlegs, and that created better situations for Stroud. There were also, with that too, I felt like the Texans had better answers for these blitzes. So I think that's something you can watch for here is, do they have better answers? Like when they're blitzing, is there an obvious way to go? Because again, against Jacksonville, there were times where they took it away. When you get those ends dropping and you get four other guys rushing or whatever, some simulated pressures. That's where, and that's a little bit unusual when you have both ends dropping like that. Will they keep doing that? So I think that's one thing. Move the pocket, change the launch angle, RPOs, play actions, bootlegs, etc. Those all can help any quarterback. And then the other thing is, and this is one of the things that these guys really like about Jaden Daniels that I think can work well against this team, is the quick processing, right? They've talked about this all off season and before the draft, after the draft, during the summer, this week, is the quick mental processing that Daniels has. He does that virtual reality stuff. He's been doing that. So those are some things where you can speed that VR stuff up to go faster than real game speed. That helps create an advantage for him. So what he may see in a game might be a little bit slower than what he had seen in the VR virtual reality stuff, that technology, the stuff that he uses. So that's all good for him. So, and it does give you a chance for big plays, as Jenna Lane told you the other day on the podcast, I think on Friday. So that's something to watch for as well. But you got to do it. You've got to handle the pressure. So it's not just on the offensive line to do it. And I think this is where Tyler Biadasz really helps with being a veteran center. I know Nick Allegretti has faced the Bucs a few times too. Some of these guys have faced the Todd Bowles defense. So it's not going to be foreign to them. And that's how it may be, they're new as a group, but this stuff isn't foreign to them. And it can help a young quarterback like Daniel. So his decisions will be key. And a big thing is too, if you get under rest, make good decisions. So that's going to be something you have to watch for certainly as well in this game. But I think it's going to be interesting. Just because they blitz doesn't mean he's going to be under siege. Like one of the things they do though, that is something else worth watching. And I felt like they did a good job of keeping Trevor Lawrence in the pocket and contained in the pocket. I didn't think they were able to do that as much with Stroud. So can they keep Daniels in the pocket? But if they do, then you're going to have to make some quick decisions. The way they like to do that at times is those tackle stunts. So the ends can penetrate inside and get maybe their pressure, and the ends just the tackles play contain on the outside. That's how you create that pocket that it's hard to get through. So, you don't want to see, if you're a defense, you don't want to see Daniel slipping outside because they know that he can hurt him in that situation. Anyway, that's one thing. Number two, curiosity about the offense. Like, I think it's fairly intriguing to try and determine, like, what is this offense going to look like? We don't know. Like, we know what a Cliff Kingsbury offense looked like with the personnel he had in Arizona. But now you combine it with Anthony Lynn's influence, Brian Johnson, his influence, Bobby Johnson's influence in the run game, and then different personnel. Like, what can he do here that maybe, he wasn't able to do right away in Arizona? And, but that it's going to be a variation of what he has been running. What I do expect him to play fast. I do expect a lot of no huddle. And I think these guys are looking forward to that tempo. And, the one thing too is, if you're going to play tempo, you better put your defense in a good spot, because if you don't, then the defense is not going to be very happy. So if you're playing tempo, you better be picking up first downs, because it's going to be hard on the defense otherwise. But what they do like, I know in talking to guys, what they do like, they feel like they can get teams tired by doing this. Get maybe the lineman to stand up a little bit. When Kyle Shanahan was here, and I used to love when they would go up tempo with Kyle here, didn't do it all the time, did it when he needed it, and it could be effective. But man, you'd watch him. He would make the big fellas run. So he'd throw a smoke route out to the left. They'd throw a smoke route out to the right. The lineman got to run over here. The next play, they got to run over here. Maybe do it again that way. Now you start hammering. So you get them run, but keep them on the field, because you're not huddling. So keep them on the field, and now you start pushing. Now you start getting some arm tackles. That's where guys like Brian Robinson can start to really excel. And, I think that's something to watch too. And I will say, there's a lot of talk about like how many receivers can really do things for them. They don't need to always have 3 or 4 receivers out there. I don't think you're going to see that. I don't know how much we're going to see it, to be honest. So I'm going to say, I don't know. What I do know, in Arizona, they use a lot of 2 tight end sets. I pretty much anticipate they're going to use a lot of that this time as well. We've seen 2 running back sets, whether it's with Eckler and Robinson in the backfield, whatever. or maybe a creative use of another guy, one of the receivers coming out of the backfield. And I know in the summer was Kaz Allen. Would somebody else fill that role here? But I do think you can get some of those sort of mismatches or create matchup situations there, maybe put guys in favorable spots. And yes, you will have 3 receiver sets as well. But I think there's some variety to this offense that how does it all play out? I know like some guys I got to tell you, man, they feel pretty good about where they're at with everything with this offense. Now you just got to go see on the field. I don't know what to expect. And I've told you before in 2012, you saw one thing in the summer, then you saw something that was dramatically different once the season started because of how they started to piece things together. And it's funny because you talk to people. I was talking to Logan Paulson about this, and the one thing he said, and I believe, and I agree with this too, they were not a good pocket passing team necessarily with Robert. And you can look at the numbers, and the numbers can show you one thing, but they didn't feel that's what they were because some of that was because of the style of offense they were running. Whereas this guy is, if you took away the legs, he can still hurt you from the pocket. And I think that's a difference. That gives him a little bit of a, no pun intended, leg up going into his first start. Those 55 games he's played, saw a ton of blitzes and different defenses in the SEC. That also helps. So, but the tempo is going to be a big aspect. And, if you get into a rough spot, if they want to start doing things, you can start to change the tempo, almost like a pitcher, like a Greg Maddux type pitcher, where you can change the eye level of a pitch and maybe create a little bit of, different confusion for the offense or the defense or whatever. I would expect that. Brian Robinson, that he's going to be a big key as well. And I know it's funny because I'm going to read you a quote that he said during, the other day, just about what he thought of this offense. And I know he's been excited. And I think it's funny because when we were talking the other day, somebody mentioned that, you're going to, we all know you haven't been used as much as any, people think you should be. And he just kind of gets this smile on his face, like a very knowing smile. And the one thing he did say is something is coming. I don't know exactly what it's going to be yet, but I know it's going to be something good. So, I think he's pretty excited. You look at Terry McLaurin. So I know there was somebody put out a stat in the summertime about like how stationary he was. When you watch him in practice, he's not stationary. I would be surprised if he's only lining up outside. Now that's his primary spot, but I do expect, we've been told, and he told us, and just, I wouldn't be surprised if you start to move him around a little bit. Like get him in the slot once in a while. Get him as an inside receiver in a 3 receiver set in certain packages, stuff like that. Like, just to create some sort of, to help him out and then to help out your offense. So De'Ami Brown, what is he going to look like? It's funny because I asked him the other day, like, is there something about this offense that maybe fits you better? He said, no, it's just about getting a chance. I think he feels he's going to get more of a chance. Now we'll see, because we're talking about a lot of guys getting opportunities. Not everybody's going to get them. So what's the storyline that we heard in camp that's not going to play out that way? I used to hear this about other guys too, like, oh, they're going to finally get a chance, and then they don't. Will he get that? I do think the speed matters, right? They need guys on the field who have some speed. And I also think a quarterback who's willing to give his guys a chance also matters. Not every quarterback does that. Jaden Daniels does. So, but we got to see how it plays out. When does it come together? I think that's one of the intriguing parts to this season is exactly that. So number 3, the locker room. The vibe is just different. Now, and we've talked about this for a while since this group came here, since the players have come back. Whenever there's change, there's going to be a different vibe. It is very good now. It is very good. How that plays out, it's really hard to say. Like, you can go into the season thinking they're a 7-10 team based on the personnel, based on certain things. What are the little intangibles that matter? Well, I think one of the intangibles that can help lift you if the other things start to come together is that locker room camaraderie. Like, it is just different when you go in the locker room, and we've talked about this before, but you go in there and it used to be, you walk in, you turn to the left, all the receivers are there, then all the running backs, then the quarterbacks, then on the other side, it's like the defensive line, the specialists, the defensive line, the offensive line, the defensive backs, it's the linebackers over here, tight ends are over here, et cetera. You knew where all the groups are. You walk in now, you don't know who's where. Like I had to go in there, you're kind of looking around like who's paired where. Like you had Jaden Daniels next to Jeremy Chim, Emmanuel Forbes next to Terry McLaurin. So there's a different, and what it does is it creates, more, you get to know more guys. And I was talking to Reeves about this, and he said that I think he feels like this is the best he's felt new players in his team probably ever. And he said there's some guys that he knows who just got here that he feels like he knows just as well as like guys like Kendall Fuller and Cam Curl, who are his guys, but he knows them so well because of maybe the emphasis of how Dan Quinn wanted to go about building the roster and building that chemistry, that camaraderie, whatever. So there's a different vibe in there. Like I'm watching, you watch Jaden Daniels and Bobby Wagner talk trash about basketball every single day. Every single day. You have today, I'm watching Daniels talking to Jeremy Reeves and a couple others. Like he's not just on the offensive side of the ball, which is how it's been a lot of time because they're on one side of the room and you're just with the offensive guys and that's where they stay. It's not like that here. Even with like Heineke, who I felt like was well liked by all the team. Well, he's still down in the corner over there by and large. So you get to know guys. I just think there's a different level at that. And they have a players lounge now. Maybe that helps too. But I think it's been an emphasis of Quinn to put guys in situations to build that bond, maybe in some ways doing things to help foster that over some other areas that, on the field. I'm not saying they shortchange practice, but I do think that the bonding element was a big deal. And I think you can see now how much that helps. I do think you'll maximize as a roster. I don't know what that means yet. I don't know what level we're talking about. Are we talking about 8 or 9 wins, 10, or is it just still 7, but the arrow is pointing up because of the approach they're taking? We'll see. But I think that's been a major, major point of emphasis. So number 4, let's talk about special teams for a quick minute here. Because now I don't know who's going to return kicks. We talked about that earlier. But what I do know is a guy like Tyler Owens can help. The undrafted free agent safety, assuming he's going to be active for Sunday as a gunner, he can definitely help. And he can help a guy like Reeves coming from the middle as a punt protector. Because sometimes what happens is if you watch Jeremy Reeves, when he started to get going, they're double teaming him. That leaves the outside open for one of those gunners to get down there. So if they're going to double team Jeremy Reeves, watch for Tyler Owens to make some plays. And if they're going to double team Owens, look for Reeves to get down there really quick in the middle. So that's something I think that's worth watching. The other thing, we talked to Larry Izzo, the special teams coach today, and he talked too about like Cade York, big, strong leg and all that. But how long it can take guys to get used to or to start to excel as a specialist. Now, it's probably why you don't draft kickers very often, right? And, the Browns drafted him. These guys drafted Lohmiller back in the day, but, it is why it can take a minute and while they bounce around the league. He said it was more about not mechanics, but more about mental and just getting used to surviving at that position in the NFL and whatever that entails. And I think what impressed Izzo is how in the first game that he was here and he kicked like a day or two later after he got here. And it was like one of his first times kicking with Tressway and Tyler Ott and just how the operation was smooth. So we'll see what happens there. Got to prove it, man. You got to prove it on the field and we'll see with York, but it's why I think there's like a level of optimism that they have that maybe does it. The one other note, they did bring another punter in to work out on Friday. There's a trend here, folks. They're bringing in right-footed punters before games, whether it's the preseason or now the regular season. Ostensibly, they're working them out, creating an emergency punter list just in case. They all happen to be right-footed. That's fine. And that's what you're facing Sunday. So but it's a little detail that for Dan Quinn, it's all legal. There's nothing wrong with him. But I do, they have worked a lot of punters just in case, but it also helps guys get ready for Sunday. So that's a good thing for them. So, and the last thing is, I think when you look at this roster, I think it's funny because the perception outside is that the offensive line, like, whoa, my God. I don't think they have that same belief inside. I think they actually feel pretty good about what they are building on the offensive line. Now, again, we'll see it. Like, I like that interior. I think Allegretti can be good enough. I like Biadasz and Cosmi quite a bit. I think Biadasz will be a solid veteran center. I think they can survive with Lucas and then see how Coleman develops. Wiley's got to play better. And sometimes the other X factor here is how much can Jaden Daniels make this group look better? And that was always a problem last year. You had a line that needed the quarterback to help them, but you had a quarterback who needed the line to help him. It was a bad marriage. And, I remember watching the Bills game thinking, if this line had Josh Allen, they'd look a lot better. But they didn't have Josh Allen, and Sam Howell needed them to be a much stronger line. And it just wasn't going to work. But if Daniels if he's getting rid of the ball quick, 15 dropbacks in the preseason, no sacks, really didn't get hit. So that's a good sign. Different ball game in the regular season, but if he can process and get rid of the ball consistently, then you can mitigate problems with the line. Also, down and distance. Are you creating better down and distance? Are you making the play action look like your play action passes look like the runs? I felt like they did that in the preseason. So there's a lot of ways you can help through play calling, all that. Bottom line is, I think they feel better about the line than you do. So we'll see. I think the areas where they'd still have some concerns would be cornerback. And we all have questions about Forbes and St. Juste outside, not Sanders still inside. Still a rookie, but I think you obviously have to feel really good about him. I think he fits the profile exactly of who they want. And the safeties they feel good about, and they should. I think the other areas, do they have good defensive end depth? I don't think you have to have these. I think they're okay without having these, big time studs there, because I think there's ways that I think Frankie Louvu will help them. And I also think they're going to try and gear that pass rush to the tackles. That's where you have your talent. That's where you have your money. That's where you can be more productive with that. So, we'll see what happens there. But I think those are some of the areas where they'd still have some concerns. And the receiver room, I think they feel okay. But again, I think part of that is because guys like Zach Ertz and Austin Eckler, you say, well, who's the number 2 target? Well, in my mind, it's probably Zach Ertz. Just based on what we saw in practice, I would expect Ertz to get off to a good start. I think Eckler can be a big help for them as well. If his ankle is pretty good, then I think he can go out and make some plays. And that was a big problem for him last year, was he was hurt. That ankle bothered him. Now it was, so he had a high ankle sprain, then he had another sprain later in the year. Ertz told me that he didn't need to go on IR last year, but they put him on there. So bottom line is, but he still has to stay durable. But I do expect that when watching him this summer, he looked good, and he looked like he had a good connection with Jaden Daniels. So that's why I think they feel good there. Now, got to go out and make it work, whether it's just this game or for the rest of the season. There's a lot for this group to prove, but I think the big thing here is Jaden Daniels' progression, as you know. And I think at the end of the year, you're going to feel pretty good about what you have at the quarterback position with Daniels. And then, because if you get that, you can start to fill in around that. And you know what? Guys are going to want to come here if he hits. And so and you got free agency. I think it could be but I don't want to get ahead to the off season already, but I'm just saying, that's the importance of Jaden Daniels. Just finally solve that position. And I'll tell you, you watch him in the locker room this week, he does not look like a kid who's awed by making his first start. Clearly, he said there's going to be butterflies. When you watch him in the locker room, he's just being himself. You don't see signs of stress or oh goodness. You see a guy who seems confident in himself, knows what he can do, and is just being around the guys. And so that's a good sign for them. Now, got to go do it on the field. Anyway, folks, that's it for me. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something. I'll be back on Sunday night after the game, wrapping up the season opener. It's finally here. Let's go. Talk to you next time.